It's Monster Mondays with me, Geoff Arbuckle. It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. You know who I am. I'm Geoff Arbuckle, and you know what this is. This is Monster Mondays, presented to you by you-know-who, Film Seizure. You can catch new episodes of Film Seizure with myself and Jason Oliver on Wednesdays, but Mondays, well, they're for me to talk about monster movies. You know what? I've spent the last couple of weeks talking about comic book adapted monsters with 2004 and 2019's Hellboy movies. I think I'll stay on the comic book train for the rest of this month. This week's monster is one that I'll be perfectly honest and straightforward with all of you listening. I don't really know how I feel about this character. I'll admit that I may harbor some ill will toward Venom as a character that isn't all that warranted. In truth, I may have been terribly unfair to the slimy pile of alien goo. I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail in a short bit in this episode, but let's first talk about the character of Venom itself. To get the true origins of the Venom character, we must first take a little bit of a detour I might add, that no adaptation has ever taken, but is vitally important in the comic book world to help explain his origin. In 1984, Marvel Comics created what many consider to be the first maxi series inter-company crossover event with Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. That's usually just shortened to be called Secret Wars. When somebody talks about, hey, have you ever read Secret Wars? We know what we're talking about there. It was designed as a year-long event story that would later have important status quo changes seen throughout the line in one way or another. There were even new characters introduced that are still with us today. Basically, the gist of the story is that a bunch of heroes and a bunch of villains were scooped up by a godlike being known as the Beyonder and placed on a kind of a makeshift piecework, kind of pieced together world called Battle World to fight it out. To the victor, anything he, she, or it could possibly desire. During the course of the Secret Wars, Spider-Man's costume got beat up pretty good. The heroes discovered a machine in their base that would basically recreate clothing for them and basically stitch it all back together. Long story short, Spidey used the wrong machine and unleashed what was called a symbiote, a creature that would bond with a host and give him a new black costume with a never-ending supply of webbing to use, and made Spidey, that is, a little bit more powerful in general. However, it was soon realized and soon discovered that the symbiote was a captive alien that becomes super emotionally attached to its host. It caused Peter Parker to start acting aggressively and unpredictably. Soon, Peter knew he basically had to get rid of that costume. He rejected the creature, and the creature in turn latched on to Eddie Brock, a disgraced journalist and divorcee in a pretty bad place in his life. The pair, now with Venom as the primary personality in the duo, begins a campaign of revenge against Peter Parker. Over time, several others would wear the Venom symbiote, but the guy most closely connected to the character is Eddie Brock. So here's where I start talking about where I get a little unfair toward Venom. Initially, I really liked the idea of the symbiote, how it affected Peter, how it sought to get revenge against Peter once he was rejected, and so forth. I was around and aware of the comic stuff during the Secret Wars, and then later, when the Spider-Man stories had him come back from Battle World and he had his new black costume. And with fair reason to be aware of all of this stuff, Venom was massively popular as a character. It's what you would call hitting a home run on the first pitch. where I start to turn my nose up to it a little bit is in the later consistent and constant use of the character in ways that just felt like Marvel was just trying to cash in on a popular character. It's still done today. I mean, you see a character that's created for altruistic purposes and really good story-driven purposes, and then all of a sudden they're all over the place and they have a bunch of titles that they star in or whatever. It happens all the time, and rightfully so. Sometimes people get a little tired of those types of things. Venom's story is basically interesting in a codependent sort of way. But once he started showing up all over the place as sometimes an anti-hero, sometimes a sort of a hero, sometimes a definite villain, and so on and so forth, I got pretty turned off by that. Not to mention, they kept spinning off new symbiote characters from Venom. And you know what happens when you get copies of a copy of the original. Things get bad pretty fast. To be fair, this is during a time in the comics that started to slant more towards darker and grittier tone that I'm just not into. This era of comics is usually referred to as grimdark because the sense of wonder and sense of humor was gone. And we had multiple series for Ghost Rider, who was like a spirit of vengeance, the Punisher, who would go around and kill bad guys, and so forth. They were just too much of that stuff being published at that time. Hell, even Venom would have his own series and miniseries during the early and mid 90s. But enough about the comics backstory. You're here to basically hear me talk about the 2018 movie version of Venom. This was the second time Venom was adapted for the big screen. In 2007, Topher Grace played Eddie Brock in Venom in Spider-Man 3. It's often maligned, but I can usually find the reason why Topher Grace was cast as Brock and the intention to show Brock as kind of a mirror image or make him comparable to Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. I can usually find some interest in that idea. Here, though, we get someone who's a little bit more in line of what we think of in terms of Eddie Brock with Tom Hardy. In the 2018 movie, an organization called the Life Foundation, run by a young pioneer in various scientific fields, Carlton Drake, sent a spacecraft to find habitable worlds. The probe found a comet teeming with bunches of symbiotes. 4 of the samples were collected, and the probe returns to Earth, where it crashes in Malaysia thanks to one of the specimens basically escaping. Drake begins working with the symbiotes and hopes to find some sort of medical advancement or military advancement and basically cash in off of it. When human tests prove to be a goddamn horror show, the lead scientist working with Drake contacts Eddie Brock so that he can investigate and tell all. In an accident, he's bonded to Venom, who forms a friendship over time with Brock. They decide to use their powers for good, particularly when the escape symbiote named Riot, because each symbiote has names and can speak English with no problem whatsoever, so whatever, shut up. When Riot bonded with Drake and plans to call a whole shit ton of symbiotes to Earth to basically destroy everything, it's up to Venom and Brock to stop Riot and save the entire planet. So let's talk about the 3 things that I like about 2018's Venom. In the past, I've had trouble narrowing down my likes to just 3, but with Venom, it's a little easier. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking because the movie, didn't get very good reviews, or that it's easy for me to spot 3 things in particular to like because of that or whatever. Well, that's not actually true. I am aware of its relatively poor reviews, and particularly some of the concerns over the final act and how that played out in the movie. And I understand and have my own issues with that, but frankly, I found it rather entertaining. Is it the best thing ever? No, but it's better than Spider-Man 3 by a long shot. So here we are with my very first like. It's perfectly entertaining. Better yet, it is a brisk movie that doesn't really overstay its welcome. Venom is a globby, icky thing that oozes around. I'm not sure you're ever going to get Shakespeare from that. The action scenes are plenty fine, And there are some good fights that take place before Brock can kind of understand that Venom has bonded to him and what he can do with it. I know this seems a little wishy-washy on this but I mean it. A movie that has a modicum of entertainment value is one thing, but a movie with a modicum of entertainment value that knows how to move its story along and not overstay its welcome, that's a hard thing to find these days, particularly on a movie that deals with a very popular character with a bunch of built-in fans coming to the movie. Second, I really love the idea of having Marvel Studios movies that take place apart from the main Marvel Cinematic Universe. The thing is, when you adapt these characters from a comic book and from the comic book medium, is that, they're part of a large living universe. And universe is the key word here. That's something that is freaking huge. If we look at the Star Wars universe, for example, I desperately would love to see stuff happen without any connection to a Skywalker or Darth Vader or anything we know from the various trilogies. I want to explore that universe and open it up. Let it live on its own before integrating it in, or don't integrate it at all. Venom feels like something that could integrate, but there's absolutely zero pressure to connect it to the Avengers or even Spider-Man. That gives me a great deal of hope that we could just have these stories happening all over the place and, have it on this side of the gigantic world that all these guys live in and have something else go on the other side. There's absolutely no need to always, draw those lines to all of these movies. It's okay that Eddie Brock is fighting bad guys with a Venom symbiote, unawares of Captain America punching fascists. Just because they're all Marvel characters, they don't have to always be in each other's bubbles. Finally, I have to give gigantic kudos to Tom Hardy. His relationship with the Venom character is hilarious to watch. They act like an old married couple. It's a little like good cop, bad cop within the same person. Eddie has charisma and actually gives a crap about other people being hurt or even being killed by Venom. And Venom is just this monster. This guy wants to eat people and just flat out kill them when he's threatened. But that only goes so far. In an interesting twist, it's revealed that the Venom symbiote is a little bit of a loser on his homeworld. He's not a leader or an alpha like Riot is. So for all of his bluster, Brock may actually be the one who supplies the heroism in their coupling. Hardy still plays excellently against, nothing. When filming, he's talking to himself and reacting to whatever Venom would be saying. While he is also supplying Venom's voice, he's likely filming with no idea of his other performance or without it easily accessible to him for any given scene. So it's really easy to say that Tom Hardy is an extremely underrated actor. Yeah, this movie isn't perfect, but it's fun. Tom Hardy is seemingly having a blast with this movie, and most people will already know what people have said about this movie for good or for ill, but so did I. I watched this at home, over 2 months after it was released in theaters. I just waited for the DVD. If you aren't really sure, or you thought you might be interested in it, but you weren't really sure because of the reviews, check it out. I mean, it's probably not asking too much of you to take a couple of hours to check out a movie where the hero wants to pick people up, rip their heads off, and drink their blood from the holes in their victims' necks. So that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. Until next week, I'll see you later. And don't forget to check out new episodes of Film Seizure each Wednesday and a new installment of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon on filmseizure.com, as well as check out new posts at my website, B-Movie Enema, every Friday.
Bye.